The big news over the weekend is, well, twofold. Number one, there was an attack on Syria, which we'll discuss in a little bit. And second of all, James Comey sat down with George Stephanopoulos of ABC News. So, first of all, it is always obligatory. Whenever I mention James Comey, whenever I mention George Stephanopoulos of ABC News, I must recall he was the former chief of staff for the Clintons. So this is a guy who is very tied into the Democratic network. I mentioned that not because I thought he did a particularly terrible job last night in the interview, but to point out that the media are wildly biased in favor of James Comey, who is playing one of the great scams of all time. I mean, the guy was largely responsible for Hillary Clinton losing the election, and now he's going to retire off of Democrats who are angry that Hillary Clinton lost the election. So well done, James Comey. I mean, that is a scam for the ages. That is usual suspects type stuff, just incredible stuff. So James Comey does a full 2-hour interview with George Stephanopoulos on ABC News. Did he have anything brand new, shocking to say? Not really. It was mainly vindictive and self-gratifying and self-justifying, and that's what it was. It was James Comey grandstanding at his best. There are a few takeaways from this interview. It was kind of interesting. I mean, he had some interesting things to say, but I have to say the amount of ego that was just pouring off the screen was incredible. The amount of smug between Stephanopoulos and James Comey. It is amazing that the world did not implode from simple overload of smug. And I should know. I mean, I'm a pretty smug dude. But let me tell you something. James Comey and George Stephanopoulos outclassed me by at least a couple of weight classes. It's pretty impressive. James Comey started out the interview by saying, quote, "I was never going to write a book, but I decided I had to try to write this one to try and be useful. That was my goal after I was fired, to be useful. And it occurred to me maybe I can be useful by offering a view to people, especially to young people, of what leadership should look like and how it should be centered on values. In other words, maybe I should write a book talking about how awesome I am in order to inform all the young people about how awesome I am so they too can one day be awesome like I am." Or alternative explanation, you're fired and you want to make a lot of money. I'm going to go with that one. Right? You're going to get a giant advance and sell hundreds of thousands of copies of your bitchy book. I'm pretty much going to say that's probably what James Comey was doing. It probably wasn't like, you know what? I'm out of office now. What do I have to do? You know what? I'm going to go home. I'm going to look over my flower garden. And I'm going to write about leadership because that's what young people need today, leadership. No, it's probably the whole selling lots of books things. And then he goes on in the interview to rip on President Trump. He, of course, says that Trump is a forest fire, going to do tremendous damage, going to damage important norms. But a forest fire gives healthy things a chance to grow that had no chance before that fire. And the entire interview is just incredibly self-serving. My favorite metaphor that he used for himself is he said that when he went to the White House to talk to President Trump, he said, "There's a movie called The Sixth Sense that I talk about in the book where Bruce Willis doesn't realize he's dead. That's the way I felt. I felt like I was totally alone, that everybody hated me, and that there wasn't a way out because it was really the right thing to do." He's talking about now going to the White House to talk to President Obama about revealing the fact that Hillary Clinton's emails had been found on Anthony Weiner's server. And that, in a way, I'm ruined, but that's what I have to do. I had to do it that way. What a hero. He's just like Bruce Willis from The Sixth Sense, guys. It's just amazing. He's walking around. He's dead. He doesn't know it the entire time. Spoiler alert. James Comey. Don't worry, though. He doesn't have ego. This is a man who is completely free from ego. What a wonderful man he is. Throughout the interview, he praises President Obama, Jay Johnson, the former Department of Homeland Security Secretary. He says that he wishes Hillary Clinton would read the book so that she would know why he did what he did during the election cycle. And then, of course, he dumped on Trump personally. So here was James Comey dumping on President Trump personally. This is clip 7.
It was the first time you met Donald Trump. What was your impression?
He had impressively coiffed hair that looks to be all his. I confess I stared at it pretty closely, and my reaction was, must take a heck of a lot of time in the morning. His tie was too long, as it always is. He looked slightly orange up close with small white half moons under his eyes, which I assume are from tanning goggles.
Okay, so this is definitely the kind of image that James Comey wants to project, right? He wants to project lawman image. And that's what a lawman would do. I mean, that's really, if you were just like Jimmy Stewart, G-Man, and you were to give an interview about a president who you thought might be corrupt, the first thing you do is talk about the half moons under his eyes and the length of his tie. That really makes James Comey look real good here. I mean, this is obviously not somebody. He was writing a book about leadership, guys, a book about leadership for children. That was his goal. It was not to be the center of attention. No, not he. Not he. And then, of course, James Comey liked to drop a bunch of inflammatory lines in the middle of this interview because there really is nothing new in the book other than him whining about President Trump and talking about how President Trump is terrible. Now, whatever you think about Trump, they're two separate questions, right? Is Trump corrupt? Has Trump done things that are ill-advised? Has President Trump interfered in investigations, right? These are all legit questions. But what is not really a legit question is whether James Comey is a politically motivated actor. He's pretty clearly a politically motivated actor. That was pretty obvious when he admitted on camera that when he went to speak with President Trump, you recall, he went to speak, James Comey, former FBI director, when Trump first was about to take office. Comey went to brief him, and he briefed him on the Russian dossier, the Steele dossier, which had been compiled by a British spy named Christopher Steele. It had been paid for by Fusion GPS, which was being paid for in turn by Hillary Clinton's law firm. And James Comey did not reveal to President Trump that this dossier had been gathered at the behest of Hillary Clinton's pay. Right? He admits that in clip 8.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
No, I don't even think I used the term Steele dossier. I just talked about additional material.
But did he have a right to know that?
That had been financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
Well, who cares about your goal? He's the president of the United States. Don't you owe him that information? I mean, you work for him. I mean, you're the head of the FBI, and the FBI is an executive branch agency. Shouldn't you have told him that the Steele dossier was funded by Hillary Clinton? Wouldn't that have been a little bit important for him to know? But again, the goal here is for James Comey to obviously come off as above the fray. Well, he didn't come off as above the fray anywhere in this interview. There's an enormous amount of self-serving material in this interview. And of course, he's giving the press everything spicy they want. Is clip 9 available? Do we have clip 9? Okay, so at one point during the interview, Comey is asked specifically about the P tape. And here's what he said. He said, and then Trump said to me, another reason you know it's not true is I'm a germaphobe. There's no way I'd let people pee on each other around me. And that caught me so much by surprise, I actually let out an audible laugh. And because it was just one of those, I was startled by it. And I remember thinking, well, should I say that? As I understand the activity, sir, it doesn't require an overnight stay. And given that it was allegedly the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton, I would imagine you could be at a safe distance from the activity. All these things are bouncing around my head, but instead of saying it, it just led me to think the world's gone crazy. But again, the goal here for James Comey is to sell as many books as humanly possible. There are really 3 scandals in which James Comey is involved, right? Scandal number 1 is the Hillary Clinton issue, right? The Hillary Clinton issue. Scandal number 2 is the Russian issue with President Trump. And scandal number 3 is his firing. They're 3 separate issues. And in each one, the story he tells is really not particularly great. Okay, so the Hillary handling itself was bad. First of all, let's get out of the way how much he hates President Trump. The man just hates President Trump. So here are several clips of him talking about how much he hates President Trump. Here's where he compares President Trump to a crime family. Again, I'm not sure why no political advisor sat Comey down and said, you know, James, it might be worthwhile for you to appear not to hate President Trump if you actually want to go after him, right? You might want to look as though you're disinterested rather than that you have a personal animus toward him. Apparently, nobody bothered telling him, so instead he compares Trump to a crime family.
I had a flashback to my days investigating the mafia, La Cosa Nostra. There's a distinction between a friend of yours and a friend of ours. I felt this effort to make us all, and maybe this wasn't their intention, but it's the way it felt to me, to make us all amica nostra. We're all part of the messaging. We're all part of the effort. The boss is at the head of the table, and we're going to figure out together how to do this.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Well, okay, come on. And what kind of question is that, George Stephanopoulos? How strange is it? He's doing it on purpose to sell books, you idiot. But of course, George Stephanopoulos knows that. He's not an idiot. Okay, that was not all that Comey had to say about President Trump personally. And then he talks about how Trump was morally unfit to be president. This is clip 16. This is Comey talking about how Trump is just unfit, right? Again, a lot of this is being driven by the fact that Comey is angry that Trump fired him.
You write that President Trump is unethical, untethered to the truth. Is Donald Trump unfit to be president?
Yes, but not in the way I often hear people talk about it. I don't buy this stuff about him being mentally incompetent or early stages of dementia. He strikes me as a person of above average intelligence who's tracking conversations and knows what's going on. I don't think he's medically unfit to be president. I think he's morally unfit to be president.
Okay, and then he continued exactly along these lines, again, talking about how Trump has been compromised by the Russians. He says that it's possible the Russians compromised Trump. Now, again, he doesn't have any evidence of this. Anything's possible. Anything's possible. Does George Stephanopoulos follow up by saying, do you have evidence that the Russians have compromised Trump? No, of course not. They just sort of let it hang out there. So here's James Comey saying that it's possible that Trump is compromised by the Russians.
Do you think the Russians have something on Donald Trump?
I think it's possible. I don't know. These are more words I never thought I'd utter about a president of the United States, but it's possible.
That's stunning. You can't say for certain that the president of the United States is not compromised by the Russians.
Yeah, it is stunning, and I wish I wasn't saying it, but it's the truth.
Great interviewing there again. Great interviewing there again by George Stephanopoulos. Just reiterate the point. That is stunning, what you're saying. I'm not going to ask you for any evidence of what you're saying, but it is stunning that you would even say that, Mr. Comey. Just incredibly stunning. And so Comey, in his book, he talks about really 3 separate things. He talks about the Hillary investigation, he talks about the Trump investigation on Russia, and then he talks about being fired. And so what he says about Hillary demonstrates what a political actor he is. Right, so recall that back in July, it was James Comey who came out and made a long statement basically about why Hillary Clinton had violated the law but should not be indicted. Remember, he said that she had been extremely careless with her emails, which is the definition of gross negligence under the law. And then he says we won't indict her anyway. We shouldn't have indicted her anyway. Right, so now he says he shouldn't have described how sloppy Clinton was with all of her email server stuff.
Was trying to be honest and clear with the American people. What she did was really sloppy.
Okay, he says what she did was really sloppy, but he says that he made a mistake describing how sloppy she was with her email scandal because in doing so, it made it look like she had violated the law, when in his opinion, she had not actually violated the law. Then later, he says that the reason that he came forward with the letter, remember the letter right before the election in which he says that hundreds of thousands of her emails were found on Anthony Weiner's computer? And then he says that he released a letter a few days before the election. Now he says the reason that he did that is because the polling showed that Hillary was really far up in the polls, and if she won, he didn't want this cloud to be over her presidency. So he says, I came out with that letter just to be completely transparent, and he says that assuming Hillary would have won probably influenced his decision-making.
I don't remember consciously thinking about that, but it must have been, because I was operating in a world where Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump. And so I'm sure that it was a factor. Like I said, I don't remember spelling it out, but it had to have been that she's going to be elected president. And if I hide this from the American people, she'll be illegitimate the moment she's elected.
So he's so above the fray. Don't you see how above the fray James Comey is? He's such a non-political actor. What a good guy he is. You know, he wants to exonerate Hillary Clinton before the election, or at least he wants the American public to know about this stuff so that when she's elected, then she'll be clean. But don't worry, he's totally above the fray. And you can see how upset he was that Trump was elected because he literally says in this interview, oh my God, did we have some role in this? And this is legitimately what Comey says in the middle of this interview.
And what part of you is thinking, I helped elect Donald Trump?
A whole lot of me was thinking, oh my God, did we have some role in this? Did we have some impact on the election?
Okay, well, why would you be thinking that? Let's say that you actually were the typical G-man. Let's say that you were the honorable FBI guy, the loyal FBI guy that James Comey says he is. Wouldn't you just abide by the law? Instead of saying, oh my God, were we part of this? Wouldn't you have just said, listen, the law says I have to do X. This is what I have to do. And therefore, no, that had no impact on my decision making. I did what I had to do. That's my job. I'm above personal petty grievances. I'm above personal petty politics. But he had no intention of saying any of that because, of course, it's not true. The reality is that James Comey is not above personal petty politics, as we've seen. He doesn't like President Trump. He was very disappointed when Trump won. It's pretty obvious. Or now he's at least disappointed that he was fired. And so he's trying to drag out every piece of dirt he can on President Trump. He's trying to dump that out in the public view, but he really doesn't have a lot there. And so it's all speculation. Maybe Trump obstructed justice. Maybe he's going to be blackmailed by the Russians. When there's no there, all you have to do is dump out a bunch of inflammatory material and the media will pick it up and try and run with it. Okay, well now, in the meantime, President Trump is firing back. So President Trump takes to Twitter. And here are some of the things that President Trump has been tweeting about James Comey. Quote, Comey drafted the crooked Hillary exoneration long before he talked to her, lied in Congress to Senator G, then based his decision on her poll numbers. Disgruntled, he, McCabe, and the others committed many crimes. Okay, so all of this is true. I just don't know why President Trump feels the necessity to go out there and say it because, again, I know President Trump is a counterpuncher. I know that he doesn't like what Comey's saying about him, but this is not productive. The president should shut up. All he is doing is driving the president. All he is doing is driving the news cycle. All he's doing is driving people to buy the book the same way that he drove the Fire and Fury crap book to the top of the bestseller list. Now he's going to help drive James Comey's book to the top of the bestseller list. If you can somehow get Trump to attack you and you're on the bestseller and you're in the book market, that is the best way to sell books. Trump continues along these lines. He tweets, slippery James Comey, a man who always ends up badly and out of whack. He is not smart, ! Will go down as the worst FBI director in history by far. Okay, again, don't know how useful this is. He says, I never asked Comey for personal loyalty. I hardly even knew the guy. Just another of his many lies. His memos are self-serving and, all caps, fake. But he's not done yet. He continues. Comey throws Attorney General Lynch under the bus, in quotation marks for some reason. Why can't we all find out what happened on the tarmac in the back of the plane with Wild Bill and Lynch? Was she promised a Supreme Court seat or AG in order to lay off Hillary? No golf and grandkids talk. Give us all a break. Okay, but is he done yet? Nope, the president has even more. The big questions in Comey's badly reviewed book aren't answered, like how come he gave up classified information? Jail. Why did he lie to Congress? Jail. Why did the DNC refuse to give server to the FBI? Why didn't they take it? Why the phony memos? McCabe $700,000 and more. Okay, and so this is President Trump on the warpath on Twitter, obviously. Now, here's the reality: everything he's saying in this Twitter thread is true. Everything he is saying about Comey in this Twitter thread is true. Again, the question is not true or not true. The question is useful or not useful. When the president attacks Comey and Comey attacks the president, Trump is punching down, and he's allowing Comey to go out there and respond to him. He's allowing Comey to go out there and tell his side of the story with broader public appeal. It's not smart of the president to punch back in this particular way, even though I think that Comey is exposing himself for what he is. And he concluded this Twitter thread, Trump did, by saying, unbelievably, James Comey states that polls where crooked Hillary was leading were a factor in handling stupidly of the Clinton email probe. In other words, he was making decisions based on the fact he thought she was going to win, and he wanted a job. Slimeball. Okay, so I guess we have slippery James Comey and slimeball James Comey. The president really going after it on Twitter, really enjoying himself. Yeah, again, he has the right to do whatever he wants. Do I think this is highly useful? I do not, especially because Comey is getting himself in hot water with a bunch of people, right? Not just folks on the right. He's now got himself in hot water with Loretta Lynch, the former attorney general at the time. So James Comey has accused Obama and Loretta Lynch of taking actions that jeopardized the DOJ's status in the middle of the Hillary Clinton email investigations. What he says is when Loretta Lynch got on the plane with Bill Clinton, that necessitated the FBI stepping in and making some sort of argument as to why Hillary should or should not be indicted, because obviously now people are going to think the whole thing was corrupt. Well, now Loretta Lynch is firing back on Comey and suggesting that Comey is terrible. She says, over almost 2 decades as a federal prosecutor, I have aggressively prosecuted drug dealers, violent gangs, mobsters, and money launderers, upheld the civil rights of all Americans, and fought corruption of all types, whether by elected officials from both sides of the aisle or within organizations like FIFA, that's the soccer organization. Through it all, I've never hesitated to make the hard decisions guided by the Department of Justice's core principles of integrity, independence, and above all, always doing the right thing. The Justice Department's handling of the Clinton email investigation under my leadership was no exception. Any suggestion I invoked this bedrock policy for any reason is simply false. Throughout the process, I did what I always do, rise above my politics and uphold the law. Does anyone really believe Loretta Lynch rose above her politics to uphold the law? Does anyone truly believe that? Well, neither did James Comey. Okay, you wonder why people don't trust the so-called deep state at this point? It's because it's filled with people who are political appointees, and these political appointees have actual axes to grind. And so, you know what's the best way for you to appear above the law? By being above the law. By being above the law, by acting as though you are above, or rather by being above politics. You want to appear as though you're above politics? All you have to do is be above politics, but none of these people are, and that is eminently obvious. Again, the goal here for Comey is to sell books. The goal here for George Stephanopoulos is to use Comey as a baton in order to club President Trump. Okay, that is the goal here. Now, we can talk about in a second exactly what Comey did during the Hillary scandal, during the Trump investigation, and to get fired.